everybody, Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. We're going to cover everything. We're going to cut through all the propaganda, give it to you straight from left, right, and center. The opinions are what counts. Happy Saturday, folks. Boy, what a week we had. And I tell you what, I can't think anybody rather talking about it today. Joe Visconti, welcome back to Schaftlein Report. Happy Saturday and happy weekend to you. We had one crazy week this past week.
You're not kidding. Wow. History. Every day is history.
It really is. I mean, it's just so interesting, and we're going to characterize this as we go through the show. But one thing that I noticed last week, Joe, the overwhelming left-wing media love the Democrats, high-octane support. You would think Joe Biden has never been president. I mean, they have turned the page so quickly on this guy, and rightfully so. But just the blatant, the enthusiasm, the gushing, the adoration. I mean, Joe, she has not even actually become the official nominee of the Democratic Party, although that's likely to be. And honest to God, this reminds me of Barack Obama back in the 2008 campaign. I mean, it's literally nothing short of that. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's the old three-card Monty. If you ever got caught in it once on the streets of New York and you didn't want to get caught playing that game again, I think you hit it in the head. Barack Obama showed us the template of what they're doing. They're doing it on steroids now, basically on Adderall, because they have to. And I think they got caught by surprise. I really think the machine, let's just call it that, was so the wheels were turning so fast that they didn't recognize that nature was taking over with Biden. He really was. It was accelerating. It really wasn't his fault. I have to give him a pass because I can't stand any of his policies, but it was accelerating the dementia or the senility. And they probably and they had probably all these different algorithms showing we could do this at this point, that could happen at this point, but then it happened. And they're just such hypocrites. I mean, the biggest thing is the hypocritical reality of democracy is at stake, and they just trample democracy.
Yeah, and we're going to cover this later in the show, Joe. But just the cover up. I mean, the fact is, this guy hasn't been there for a long time. I'm talking about mentally there, and it just astounds me. All these Democrats that came out that a week ago were, oh, Joe's in it to win it. Oh, he's our guy. We had a bad debate. Yeah, we acknowledge that. I mean, literally last weekend on the Sunday talk shows, he had sent out Cedric Richmond, his campaign honcho, a handful of others, and they were touting the party line. Boy, I'm telling you, I mean, it was full steam ahead for Uncle Joe. Well, then reality set in. And I think
Well,
Joe,
the other thing I've been picking up this week is how broke the Bidens are and the family, and they're under scrutiny by every federal agency because of the multitude of LLCs and the whatever you want to call the Biden family syndicate, and providing no services to foreign nations and adversaries, and reaping millions and millions of dollars without any proof that they did anything. So they're dried up, and so I think that's. And one of the commentators on, I think it was Fox this week, talked about how he probably dug his heels in looking for a bargain. And legally, we're not saying criminally, legally, offers are most likely made for him, his family members, or people to be put on boards like Nikki Haley was, when she needed money. And they had to get ready for that because they've got a lot of legal troubles ahead of them, all of them, including President Biden. So there was a lot of that probably happening while we watched the dementia roll out, and God knows, well, I'm sure history will show us nothing can be hidden in our world today anymore. So eventually things are going to come out to tell us all the things we haven't pieced together yet.
Before I get into the polling numbers, Joe, man, I tell you, a couple nights ago when he gave his, his fourth address from the Oval Office, only the fourth since he's been in office. And he hasn't met with Congress since back in 2021 when he could barely speak. you know, he's trying to read off a teleprompter. And again, I'm past the point of really caring whether we criticize Joe Biden or not. And the only reason I'm making this point, there were some people on the right that got criticized for criticizing Biden. The left wing media is all, okay, come on, he's 81 years old. He's stepping aside. We're going to talk about Joe's accomplishments. And I'm sitting there going, what accomplishments? Yeah, he signed one infrastructure bill, but outside of that, he presided over the highest inflation we've had since the 1970s. 10 million people coming across the border, wars all over the world, you know, trying to forgive student debt, which could, I mean, I can go down the laundry list of things. I keep hearing these Democrats just talking about everything he accomplished. Chris Coons gets on there last week, and literally the man's in tears, calling him, oh, the greatest Delawarean ever. And I'm just sitting here looking at this crap going,
Yeah.
listen, that speech he gave the other night where he officially, I was hoping, okay, Joe, why are you leaving? Tell us that. And no chance he wasn't going to go there. And I've actually felt sorry for our country, Joe, because watching a man who cannot even read a teleprompter, and then he started talking about
Well,
policy, and we're going to do this. All people cared about, Joe, why did you leave the race, and what are you going to do now? He wasn't going to go there.
he
And
did.
I think, go ahead.
He didn't go there. And Chris LaCivita, for the campaign manager, one of them for Trump, put out a letter, said from all of our attorneys to every network that we're suing for equal time, because that was a campaign speech. It wasn't about
Yeah.
my health is bad or I have to leave because of my health, which people would have exempted and said, sure, he's saying this as a president. But it was pushing the Democrats, pushing democracy still about to be destroyed by Donald Trump. And it was a campaign speech, and he grabbed the networks for it. So they're pushing for equal time on that. And the real thing I think everybody's thinking is they're wondering if it wasn't his health, he got out because of his polling numbers. So you quit a game if you're playing a football game or baseball game, you just throw in a towel. You could do it in boxing, you throw in the towel, but you're not going to do that with major sports. And you play and you're getting killed. The Patriots are killing the Orioles, the Baltimore Ravens. I'm sorry, by 40 points, and they got to play to the end of the game. And then
Well,
it's
here's why
another.
Joe, here's why the Democrats are such frauds. I mean, everybody in the country knew the reason that Joe Biden got out of this race was because he was being pressured by allies of Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, Hakeem Jeffries, Barack Obama. I mean, that was sort of the boxers in one side of the camp. On the other side of the camp, you had Joe Biden's advisors, Jill Biden, his sister, his son, and there was this tug of war going on. Will he stay or will he go? As the popular song used to be. And it was obvious. It was obvious. His polling numbers were tanking. Schumer and Pelosi looked at this. They saw that they were going to definitely lose the Senate, likely to lose the House, and the Democratic Party was going to go down in flames, the likes we haven't seen since Ronald Reagan defeated Walter Mondale in 1984. They saw these polling numbers, and it was not being level. These numbers were cratering. And so Biden finally made the decision, either him or somebody made the decision, but he goes to bed apparently Saturday night thinking he's in the race, and Sunday morning he changes his mind. So my point is this: all these accolades coming out about, oh, he stood up for the country and God, a great American sacrifices, personal ambition for the good of the country. All of that was complete BS. He's kicking and screaming on the way out. He did not want to leave this race, only when he was faced with the reality that I'm going to go down as one of the biggest losers since Jimmy Carter if he stayed in the race. And even then, Joe, I mean, it looked to me like he thought, he was still had a fighting chance. Whatever it was that set him over the finish line on Sunday morning last week, it, if this wasn't the most inevitable handwriting on the wall, I don't know what was.
Yeah, well, it was, Julius Caesar getting stabbed by everyone, all the senators, and then they got political blood on their hands and a dagger, and they're crying over his corpse, and it's just everybody sees it. You know what? It's strange. The people that support Democrats, I mean, we see Trump, we call him out when he does stuff that we think is, whatever, objectionable, but they don't. They know and they just refuse to criticize or go against their party, whatever their party does. And I think that's the thing that's getting Americans, and it's been getting Americans for 8, 9 years now, the double standards, the hypocrisy. And it's still going, and it's not going to stop. I mean, he's right back. Biden was right back, and Kamala will pick up with it with threats to democracy. And this is
Yeah.
what got Trump, in the assassins crosshairs was threat to democracy. They said, why did he kill him? Because he thought he was a threat to democracy. He could hated him and killed him anytime. Why did he do it now? Because they built a narrative up, the Democrats and the media, that he was a threat to democracy, existential threat. And they're back on that bandwagon, and they're not going to stop.
No, they're not going to stop, Joe. And I mean, for the next 2 months, we're going to hear threat to democracy, January 6th, which most people don't give a rat's ass about that at this point in the game. They're going to talk about abortion, even though Trump's abortion position is clear. They're going to throw this crap up about Project 25, which Trump has disavowed. So they're not going to run on their record, Joe, because they can't run on their record. Their record is atrocious. They know it. The American public knows it. And when I hear these commentators, and we're going to talk about this after our break coming up in a minute, but I hear these people talking about, well, these convention bounces and so forth. No, that's not happening. You've got a situation here, whether it's Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, now it's Kamala Harris, where the electorate is locked in. I mean, you're not seeing a gigantic swath of undecided voters. But let's do this, Joe. We're gonna take a quick break here, but when we come back, we're gonna dive into these polling numbers, and folks, we'll tell you the real story away from the mainstream media about what really happening with poll numbers. We'll dig into it. Stick with us. We'll be back shortly.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, my name is General Mike Flynn, and I'm here to talk about a limited time offer of subscriptions to Patriot.tv and how you can become a member of our Patriot Defenders subscription club and become a member of Patriot.tv. Really, it's America's network. I call it the home of truth. And you can do that for only $9.99 a month. It's a great deal by itself, but what I'm going to walk you through here in these next few seconds is a couple of package deals that we have that are unbelievable. The next membership was the annual membership at $99 that you can save right away. You save $20 if you come in at the annual subscription rate. The best deal that I think that people ought to seriously consider is the 2-year membership at $159. And it includes a special edition of my recently released documentary, Flynn, Deliver the Truth, Whatever the Cost. So along with the 2-year membership, the 2-year subscription will send you a DVD combo of the film, plus an option to stream the movie online, as well as exclusive interviews of Tucker Carlson, Devin Nunes, and myself. So go to the home of truth, right? Go to Patriot.tv today, sign up, seriously consider the 2-year subscription rate. It's an unbelievable savings. I think it's a total savings of about $70 from just signing up on a monthly or a annual basis. So thank you very much for your support. Patriot.tv is America's new network. Thank you.
And we're back. A special call out to General Michael Flynn. And folks, follow up what General Flynn was talking about. Click on that Patriot Defender, become a member, great content, and you're going to be supporting Patriot.tv with all our show hosts and guests and all the commentary we bring to you. All right, Joe, let's dive into this. Okay, the Democrats can shuffle the chairs, which they did going from Joe Biden to Kamala Harris. But the fact of the matter is, the polling numbers have been incredibly consistent. Now, what did the Democrats accomplish? I will acknowledge this, folks. They stopped the bleeding and the downward spiral that was taking place. I will acknowledge that. But the fact of the matter is this: Real Clear Politics and other organizations that track this stuff, tracking 72 polls show Donald Trump has a lead of just under 2% on a nationwide basis. Let's put that in perspective. 72 polls is a lot of polls, okay? And that's the average. You really do need to average polls. But a lot of those were taken before Kamala Harris became the nominee and before Joe Biden dropped out. I think, Joe, we need to focus on polling that's been specific to a Donald Trump, Kamala Harris race post her becoming the de facto nominee. And there was one poll that came out showed her up by 2, but as it turned out, that became an outlier poll because I'm gonna give you some data that I've got here. CNN polling, not exactly a Republican friendly organization, Donald Trump plus 3, 49-46. Why is that significant? And I'm not just pulling out the CNN poll, I'm going to talk about all of them. But Joe, why is that 49-46 significant? Well, in 2020, Joe Biden defeated Donald Trump by 4 points. Today, if that CNN poll is accurate, as many others are, plus 3, that's a 7-point swing. Well, we know how close some of the swing state margins were. And here's the key piece behind this polling thing, Joe, I want to hear your commentary on. You've heard even some liberal Democrats and some smart Democrats like a David Axelrod and James Carville, practical people, not hardcore leftists like a lot of the Democrats are. They have said, look, if Donald Trump is polling 49%, he is going to win this election. They've come right out and say it. Now, you ask yourself a question, well, why? How does 49% win the election? I think it's reasonable to assume that Cornel West and Jill Stein, either collectively or individually, will get 1% of the vote. Kennedy, who knows, could get as little as 4, as high as 8. It varies. But if Donald Trump is sitting there at 49, knowing that there's going to be what I'll call shrinkage, some amount of vote elsewhere, Donald Trump is not going to be beaten at 49%, Joe. Give me your thoughts on the mathematics here and what you've seen in the polling, because
Sure.
I don't think there's going to be a lot of movement here.
On Thursday, the Rasmussen poll, which is more positive for Trump, but it came out with Trump up 7 points. These are national polls, and I think the audience has to recognize that that the national polls, which is basically the popular vote, Republicans usually don't do well in the popular vote. Trump lost that in 2016. Bush lost that in 2000. But that's a popular vote, and it's not an electoral college vote, and it's not a vote of the swing states. So we need to just look at the swing states for real, which include North Carolina. I would say Virginia is going to be a swing state. Nevada already is not even a swing state. It's in the Trump category. That's historic. Arizona is a swing state, Georgia, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. And except for Wisconsin, Trump is beating Kamala on many of these polls by 4, 5, 6, 7 points. And it's not going away. Biden was worse because people are more embarrassed, but it's the economy, stupid. And I really think that soundbite from the Clinton administration is really what's driving everything. We got to go back to the pocketbook issues. Nobody can afford the utility bills that are coming across, the cars, the insurance for your home and your cars, food costs. It's just non-sustainable with past credit card debt that everyone's been carrying post-COVID. And this is hitting 70% of the public in America. And that's, I believe, is the driver that's going to keep these swing states in the Trump category.
We're going to talk a little bit about the economy a little bit later in the broadcast, and I'm going to echo some of the pieces you talked about, Joe. Jared Bernstein was on CNBC back on Thursday, and I'll give you his commentary, because one of the reasons that GDP number came out 2.8% was because there was an inventory built up. It would have been less without that. Let me give you some of these other polling numbers here. The betting odds right now are showing Donald Trump with about 60 to 62% chance of winning. Harris is sitting anywhere from 35 to 40. Now, could those numbers tighten? Sure, they could tighten. But here's the thing, Joe. I'm not seeing, again, they changed horses, Joe Biden to Kamala Harris, no pun intended. But the numbers did not change that much. I mean, in this YouGov poll, for example, only 39% of independents believe she's qualified to be president. On a national basis, when you take independents, Republicans, Democrats, that number is 47-47. Now, you may disagree with somebody's policies, but if half the country feels you're not qualified for the job, how How's she going to get above 47% in the voting?
It
I mean,
is. It's qualifications purely. The polls are driven. Everybody knows that she's not qualified, and it's not that she was a DEI hire and all that other stuff years
no,
ago. The reality is
ridiculous.
she hasn't done anything what she was supposed to do on the border, and it was the name czar, even though it didn't come directly by Biden as a legal czar. Everyone in the media used it. Now they're walking that back, but she was in control of the border and did nothing. So that's what people remember. And that's what's all over social media right now. Every meme and attack thing you could see on Kamala is her roots of what she hasn't done. And so qualification to be president, where Joe, they knew he was qualified, but he was slipping and maybe somebody else was making decisions for him. He maybe still had enough intellect where he could decide what was being presented to him as a president, even though he was slipping. With this lady, she's the most liberal person as a U.S. senator ever. She
Yep,
beat out
ever.
Bernie Sanders, and so everybody sees it. So it is qualifications. And I watched one interview on MSNBC this week, and they had like 6 or 7 women asking them questions in a focus group, and they said she hasn't done anything. She's not qualified, and they don't like her. And that's a big thing. So I think she's not going to be as safe as everyone thinks with the women vote. I got to think women will come home to Trump that are Republican and independents, and it's going to be based on qualifications and policy.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned independence there. Okay, so let's take a look. You mentioned independence, and then you also mentioned that Rasmussen poll. That Rasmussen poll had Trump 50 to 43. The last time Rasmussen polled with Joe Biden on the ticket, it was 50-42. So she ticked up 1 point. Now, again, that's a pretty big gap between what the average of all the other polls are. But Scott Rasmussen has historically been a very, very good and accurate pollster. So when I see numbers like this, obviously you and I as Trump supporters, I mean, that's a big deal. Okay. And again, look at this CNN number 49%, Rasmussen poll 50%. Okay. Let me give you a couple others here. Hill Emerson. Okay. This had Donald Trump up in, as you mentioned earlier, Joe, in 6 of the swing states and tied in Wisconsin. And I look at the Quinnipiac poll. That's got Donald Trump up also. Again, sitting there 48, 46% up too. So if you look at these numbers, 48, 49, 50, let's just call it 49%. You know, people are expecting Kamala Harris to get a bump out of the Democratic convention. She may get a small bump. But the idea
Yeah.
that it's like where you used to get like 6 to 10 point bumps, I just don't see it because Donald Trump's supporters are not budging. They are not,
They're
and
not.
the question, they're really not,
The thing
Joe.
is,
And
Quinnipiac. Yeah, you mentioned Quinnipiac, Connecticut, right over here, the university. And I ran for governor in 14, and that Q poll, that damn, you can't stand it because they're lefties, but they're very accurate. And don't forget,
they
again,
are.
these are national polls where Trump looks like he's leading only by 2. Expect that on the popular vote. That is not going to be an electoral college vote turnout, and that's the part that gets a lot of people to get afraid. Well, it's only 2 points. No, it's not. It's going to be a landslide if you look at the swing states, which determine the electoral college. Again, it's almost like the tax bill at your local community when they have they set the tax rate and they marginalize it, and people never can figure out assessment versus 70%. It's the same thing with polling. People don't realize, and so there is fear in Trump supporters that her or Biden could have been close in the popular, and they really need to be. That's what this show is all about: educating the public to recognize the swing states that make up the electoral college. And I think it's 320, maybe 325 for Trump this cycle. That's what it's looking like.
Well, it is, and that again, that could change. So one thing I don't want to do is give a false sense of security because the reality is this: Donald Trump was on a glide path to a landslide victory until Joe Biden got out of the race. Joe, by definition, I don't think they can do any worse. I really don't. And whether we think she's qualified or not, here's the argument you're going to hear from the left. Why? By saying Kamala Harris is not qualified. Wait a minute. She was a California district attorney. She was a senator from California. She's been a sitting vice president for 3.5 years. No, 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 no. That's racist, sexist, blah, 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 whatever. The fact of the matter is, she was selected as Joe Biden's vice president after she got 0 delegates in 2020. And Joe, I'm in your camp. I don't believe that crap. But when I hear Republicans say, "Oh, she's a DEI hire," that actually makes me cringe. That is BS on our side, and I'm calling it out because I don't think there's a shred of truth to that. The fact is, she's the sitting vice president and has been there for 3.5 years. Now, you may totally disagree with her policies, but let's not quote insult her by saying, she is not quote worthy of the job. I don't think she is based on her accomplishments and her policies and her liberalism. But I think we need to focus the campaign on the issues and not the personality, Joe, because she's got a terrible record as vice president. I mean, she was responsible for the border. Biden put her in control of the border. And her famous comments. Well, in Lester Holt, ask her a question. Have you been to the border? Well, I've been to Guatemala. Have you been to the border? Well, no, and I haven't been to Europe either. I mean, some of this stuff that comes out of her mouth is really stupid. But the fact is, under her leadership, up to 10 million people crossed that border. The only one you could ever see from the administration dealing with it was Alejandro Mayorkas, and they tried to get him impeached, but the Democrats would have none of it. So I think when you break down her record, Joe, I think the American people's looking at this and they're starting to have questions. And she hasn't even been hit by any of the attack ads yet. Hold your thought real quick because we're at break time. But when we come back, Joe, we're going to talk a little more about her in the job as vice president and what Trump needs to do to really put this thing away.
Sounds rolling. All 3 cameras. We're good.
Is there any regrets that you have in life? I should sit here and say, yeah, I got a lot of regrets. But when I look back on my life and I understand the lives that were lost, I mean, I'm sitting here with you. And I can tell my story.
Former National Security Advisor, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, pleaded guilty today to lying to the FBI.
He was one of the most respected generals in the military.
He was, by definition, the most dangerous possible person for Donald Trump to hire.
Really brilliant military career, serving 33 years.
Why was he being so elusive?
Mike Flynn told the truth and faced life in prison.
Every American needs this historical DVD keepsake. Flynn delivered the truth, whatever the cost. Hand signed by General Michael Flynn, one of America's most treasured military heroes. Order now at the Patriot TV store. Go to Patriot TV, click on Store, and grab a once-in-a-lifetime chance to own a treasured piece of American history. And get your own personal download link to watch America's most talked-about movie, as well as a DVD hand-signed by General Michael Flynn. Use promo code PTV at checkout to get special savings. The Patriot TV store. Incredible savings and a secure, hassle-free shopping experience.
And we're back. Hey, Joe, one thing that I didn't mention, and I'm going to turn it over to you on that Rasmussen poll, Trump is leading among independent voters 53-33, a 20-point gap. So while all these Democrats can get out there and fawn over, the glorious Kamala Harris, folks, the fact of the matter is in this country, and these are ballpark numbers, so I'm not getting too technical with you, about a quarter of the country's Democrat, a quarter of the country's Republican, half the country's independents. Go ahead, Joe. You were getting ready to make a point before we went to break.
Yeah, well, I get into campaigns too. So I've been working on as a friend for someone who's running against Jim Himes here in Connecticut, in the 4th District of Greenwich, the Gold Coast in Connecticut, and it's you're hardly able to win, but still you can measure some of the things that are occurring. And he put up an ad, which I worked with him on, showing Kamala saying, I've been to the border. And Lester Holt, as you mentioned, said, you haven't been to the border. And she says, well, I wasn't in, I hadn't been to Europe either. And so we close with the candidate saying his name at the end. It's all he says for 4 seconds legally, by Federal Election Commission guidelines, but tens of thousands of views on Instagram, and that person doesn't even have an account. 97% of the views were people that aren't followers of the campaign. So that immigration thing, I think, is the biggest, at least in the next couple of weeks, because going back to finances, the public is just outraged that they're broke, they can't afford to live, and it's not that the people came across it, but these people that are coming across illegally are taking the safety net, the Social Security, the money, the things that they need, the help they need. So it's insult to injury on top of finances. And her being that orders are right now out of the gate, it'll probably keep going for a few weeks, but it's very, very effective out of her own words. And I think the unaffiliated, or the independent, they call them, people that aren't registered with the party, are going to continue to be at 20 points. Is insane. And that at Rasmus, and even if it was 15 and a spread between Kamala and Trump on people that aren't a Democrat or Republican, that is not going to change overnight. And the Democrats are not going to be built on it. And I think maybe they're just trying to not bleed out as they would have with Biden, and fight for the House and fight for the Senate. I think that's got to be their playbook. They stopped the leaking. The boat was sinking, and they've got at least the boat's plugged. It can't go, but it's not going to sink.
Right. No, I'm in your camp on that, because when Biden was the candidate and people could see how feeble he looked, his inability to stand on 2 feet and talk, even butchering up teleprompters, and even when he flew back from Las Vegas and he was standing, on Air Force One, how they get off the plane and he looked really rigid, and he seemed to struggle getting off the plane, and that image was transpired with Donald Trump, being shot with flag and delivering a successful convention, and again, it was just too much. But let me tie in your point there, Joe, on the economy, because economic numbers came out on Thursday, and the economy grew 2.8%. Consumer spending up 2.5%, business spending 3.1%, government spending up about 3%. So when first blush, you look at that report and you say, well, we're not heading for a recession, and that does look correct. 2.8% is solid economic growth. Hard to argue that point. But then you dive in underneath these numbers. And this is what the Council of Economic Advisors for the Biden administration was doing. Inventories had built up. Okay, now that looks good, but they could sit there and not be sold. And Joe, the piece you pointed out, inflation's come down to just under 3%. However, prices are not going down. And what I think is getting wrapped around the Democrats' throat is the fact that this inflation happened under their watch. It's come down, but prices are still elevated, and the credit card debt is above $1 trillion, and people are having to work 2, sometimes 3 jobs to make ends meet. Joe, excuse me, it's a problem, because those are the type of marginal voters that the Democrats traditionally are going to target. Why would anyone who is a marginal voter in that situation, who's having a tough time economically, vote for the number 2 in the Biden administration that really has no economic chops to support, a vote for? Why would they do that?
And then the college loan, the federal courts put a kibosh on that, where he wanted to bail out the people that had, student loans. That got parked. So I think if people aren't going to go for a third party candidate, if they don't like Kamala, they may just stay home. I know we can forecast as much as we want, but I see fear. I live in a very Democrat town, and I walked down the street with my friend a couple of days ago for coffee with our MAGA hats on in a very Democrat town. And you can tell by the body language of people, they're very, even with Kamala in the race, they're very, very threatened, because they know that Trump really pulled off a great convention, and the people that are so upset that that the Secret Service, so that, again, like the 60s, I think the mistrust in government is bigger than it's been since the 60s. And in that case, it was the war. It was J. Edgar Hoover spying on people. Every little tidbit we may get, conspiracy on who killed Kennedy's, John F. Kennedy. And so today it's the mistrust on a different way, but it's still mistrust of government. And that attitude, watching the government missteps, Afghanistan, and all the things we've already know, I think there's just a collective, and so I think the Democrats are very worried. They should be. I've never felt more confident in Trump winning. Of course, voter turnout and ballot harvesting and the machine. We have to build a machine if we're going to win these swing states, because those leads could just evaporate with ballot harvesting. And so I think right now the money's got to go there to make sure that the public, has a chance to mail in ballots if they have to, but know that this process is not going to be filled with, let's just say, confusion, doubts, uncertainties about where ballots are coming from. I think that right now, that's the thing we'll start to see come up in the next month as early voting begins in September.
Well, turnout's a key, because Trump voters seem enthusiastic, full of energy, ready to go vote. And like Trump said at the convention, Joe, don't wait till the last minute. Vote early, get your votes in, mail in ballots, that's fine. Track them, confirm that they're counted. And as Laura Trump said, there's a big advantage to the party to do that, because they can track whose votes are in. So they don't have to waste precious campaign resources targeting voters who've already voted. Okay, that's a big deal, folks. So for everyone listening and viewing this program, when you get your ballot, get out, cast your vote for Trump, and get out there and support him. One thing I know for sure, Joe, and look, I do not want to sell short these Democrats. Every race eventually is close. I mean, look, we haven't had a blowout since last blowout was really Reagan and Mondale. I mean, even when Obama beat McCain, it was pretty one-sided, but it wasn't just blowout territory, landslide like that. We have tight elections in this country. I mean, think back, all the way to the 2000 election. I mean, even Bill Clinton's elections were pretty tight. So get used to it, folks. You're feeling pretty good right now. These poll numbers have come up. Even though the media is just gushing, glowing over Kamala Harris, voters are sitting back there saying, well, wait a minute. I had it pretty tough under Biden. What's she going to do that's going to be different? Well, I'll tell you a couple things they're going to do that's going to be different. One, they're going to raise a hell of a lot more money with Kamala Harris than they would have under Joe Biden. Think back a week ago, folks. The big donors had cut off the spigot for Biden. All of a sudden, he's out and she's in. $100 million comes into the campaign coffers in 3 days. That is a big number. So my point is this: do not get complacent. Don't get caught up in these polls. Things change. Look at what's happened for the last couple of weeks. We've dealt with a Trump assassination attack. We dealt with Biden fumbling, stumbling, bumbling all his way across everything. I mean, think about it. He had the disastrous debate 3.5 weeks ago. Then he tried the Stephanopoulos interview, the Lester Holt interview, the interview on black radio station. Nothing worked. So, okay, finally, reality sets in. He's gone. Now she's anointed. Okay, and there's no use of a better word to do it. She's anointed. Okay, because they circle the wagons really quickly. And I'm sitting here thinking about this, going, wow, they didn't even want to have an open convention. They wanted no part of that whatsoever. And now it's her. Now the great speculation is going to be, well, who's her vice president? I don't think that makes a hill of beans difference, because people are going to vote based on the top of the ticket. And Joe, as you correctly said, most people vote their economic interest. Yes, there's going to be single issue voters who, environmentalists, abortion activists, the special interest groups, the pro-Hamas wing of the Democratic Party. We'll get into that after the break. I mean, Joe, they're going to have their votes, but I believe this election is going to be closer than people think, because as you mentioned, Democrats are well organized on national elections. Better than our side's been, frankly. Okay. they have a candidate that they are rallying around. Think back about this for just a minute. In 2016, yeah, they rallied around Hillary Clinton. She went into that election night, and Joe, you still remember the polls. Well, Hillary Clinton has a 98% chance to win this election. And then all of a sudden the votes started getting tallied, and that number went down, 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 down. And then the look on people's faces, the horror. Well, Democrats are in that position now where it's like in a thoroughbred race. Is it a sprinter or is it a long distance horse? And right now, I think they're looking at this saying, okay, this has got to be a sprint. We've only got 100 days till election day. We've got our candidate. We've got our convention coming up. Everybody fall in line and support her. And I think that's what they're going to do. So, Joe, I expect it's going to be tight. I'd love a landslide, but I'm cautioning our side against that.
Yeah, well, I think it's going to be a landslide for Trump, but not a national. They'll probably win the popular vote, and he'll win by a landslide at Electoral College, and that's the thing people are going to have to wrap their heads around. But as far as vice president, I know we're going to be taking a break, but I think Mark Kelly is, I think his first name, Senator Kelly from Gabby Gitfer's husband from Arizona. Looks like he's been in the polling this week as the top polling candidate for vice president, and it'll either be him or the governor of Kentucky. But no matter what they do, as you said, Kamala is the person that's running for president, and any one of those governors, any of them that are on a list, would be bona fide to be a vice president. So there's really no anything defined on any of these candidates that would sink her.
Yeah, no, I concur with you. Kelly's a logical choice. It may not be him, maybe somebody else. Interesting point. Barack Obama won in an open convention. His choice candidate was Kelly, not Kamala Harris. So I know he came out and endorsed her late in the week, but there's a lot more to be said behind that. Okay, look, we're going to take our final break, and then we're going to come back. We're going to talk about where did the pro-Palestinian wing of the Democratic Party, they were on full display this past week when Benjamin Netanyahu delivered his spectacular speech to a joint session of Congress. Be back shortly.
The world is about to shift. Banks are going cashless globally with the emergence of central bank digital currency, which will bring with it programmable money and the ability to turn on or off your purchasing power based on your digital social profile. It's like the equivalent of spyware in your bank account. You need to get out of the system with the world's safest and most private assets, silver and gold.
Call Kirk Elliott, PhD at 877-547-5743. That's 877-KIRK-PhD.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, my name is General Mike Flynn, and I'm here to talk about a limited time offer of subscriptions to Patriot.tv and how you can become a member of our Patriot Defenders subscription club and become a member of Patriot.tv. Really, it's America's network. I call it the home of truth. And you can do that for only $9.99 a month. It's a great deal by itself, but what I'm going to walk you through here in these next few seconds is a couple of package deals that we have that are unbelievable. The next membership was the annual membership at $99 that you can save. Right away, you save $20 if you come in at the annual subscription rate. The best deal that I think that people ought to seriously consider is the 2-year membership at $159. And it includes a special edition of my recently released documentary, Flynn, Deliver the Truth, Whatever the Cost. So along with the 2-year membership, the 2-year subscription will send you a DVD combo of the film, plus an option to stream the movie online, as well as exclusive interviews of Tucker Carlson, Devin Nunes, and myself. So go to the home of truth, right? Go to Patriot.tv today, sign up, seriously consider the 2-year subscription rate. It's an unbelievable savings. I think it's a total savings of about $70 from just signing up on a monthly or a annual basis. So thank you very much for your support. Patriot.tv is America's new network. Thank you.
And we're back. And hey, folks, hit that Patriot Defenders button, get signed up. Let's support Patriot TV, support General Flynn, and all the great show hosts and guests that we have here on Patriot TV, one of the fastest growing networks in the country. Okay, Joe, we saw, I don't know how to describe it other than just sheer insanity taking place. Benjamin Netanyahu delivered a speech to a joint session of Congress, and I use that word joint session loosely because there was a fairly large chunk of Democrats, a la the Bernie Sanders types, the AOC's types, squad types, left wing radical Democrats who did not attend that speech. Most notable by her absence was the esteemed Vice President, Kamala Harris. Rightly or wrongly, we'll give her a pass because she had a scheduled event, but you and I know damn good and well why she didn't go to that event. She didn't want to be seen any support whatsoever for Netanyahu because the far left wing radical Hamas faction of the Democratic Party would be insulted. I mean, they were insulted. John Fetterman wore a suit, and these radicals criticized him for going and wearing a suit. Fetterman, to his credit, senator from Pennsylvania, is a staunch ally of Israel. Joe, I thought Netanyahu delivered a spectacular speech. I thought when he was chastising and ridiculing those protesters, he was spot on. I mean, who in their right mind thinks that you can burn American flags, put Palestinian flags up at Union Square, right down by the Capitol, and then desecrate statues, desecrate monuments? I mean, Joe, there should have been a lot more people arrested for that stuff. I know we got free speech in this country, but free speech doesn't give you the right to attack police officers, take down American flags from government buildings and desecrate monuments. What was your whole take on that fiasco that took place the other day when Netanyahu delivered his speech?
Well, I think in Milwaukee, things didn't happen there that would have if there wasn't an assassin that actually attacked him. There was protest. They were organized, but in Milwaukee, but they based I can't say military, National Guard, police, state police. They shut Milwaukee down, and so there wasn't going to be the violence that could have been. And you saw that this week in Washington, which means that whole Antifa, it's the same people. I can't say it's BLM, but it's the group of radicals that are always coming out during election season. And so it was delayed, I think, from happening. It couldn't happen in Milwaukee. I don't think it'll happen in Chicago in a few weeks. But I do think that movement wants to do that. That's part of the playbook of the Democrat Party. So I don't know if it'll happen in September or if events could occur in Israel that makes the whole country light up with that movement, but it's very big and it's violent. And so I see violence is a playbook move that may come out after the Democrat convention. And if the polls for Kamala, I can't say that people are intentionally doing this criminally, but it just spontaneously looks like it happens. And so I think that's going to be part of our fall. This fall, we're going to see things that are happening across the country. If her polls continue to tank, and what recourse would they have at one particular point?
Well, the interesting thing is when you see the level of vitriol by the Hamas wing of the Democratic Party and the anti-Israel slogans and the pure hate for Israel, honest to God, I don't see how a Jewish voter could vote for a Democrat. I mean, it just, to me, half the Democratic Party is anti-Israel. So,
yeah, well, they don't believe that. I live in the most Jewish town in Connecticut, and I'm surrounded by it. And I talk to half of my friends are Jewish, but they're Republicans, thank God. And they scratch their head like, we don't know what's wrong. We just don't understand why they would vote. And if they don't believe this is real, this is becoming a party plank to the Democrats. This is something going to be permanent. And I think the American Jews are kind of like in a different way in Nazi Germany when they thought it'd go away. It's just something that's temporary, and it's not temporary. And this has now been condensed. BLM, and let's just say radicals that are looking for a cause. Let's call it that. I don't care what the movement is. Those who want to do violence can wear masks, and you saw that this week with turbans on, masks. You don't know who they are. Is that something to fear? No, but I think it's something that's going to happen. But I do think that the police and law enforcement are not going to let that happen this cycle. Maybe like in 68 again, when they took billy clubs out in 68. If it happens in this country, I think you're going to see something we haven't seen in decades, with law enforcement being empowered to say, you know what, we're doing our job. And it'll probably squash that. There's so many echoes of 68. I was 12 years old. I remember it. I remember everything that happened. Bobby Kennedy getting shot and Johnson dropping out. And it's like, wait a minute, a few different characters, but does this look like 1968? It's just, and
Well,
violence was a
you know,
part of that.
you know damn good and well these, the Hamas wing of the Democratic Party is going to be out in full force in Chicago, and every other radical leftist group to try to make their pitches. And again, this could get ugly. I mean, we'll see. The Democrats inside the convention hall, again, it's going to be a complete love fest, I'm sure. But boy, outside that convention hall, that pro-Hamas wing of the party, woo! I mean,
Well,
these
unless
people
Chicago
are.
shuts it down. Unless Chicago
Say,
shuts it down like Milwaukee did. They closed the city. I have friends that went to the convention. Everything was closed. It was a ghost town, and they put the people in a path to be able to march and do their slogans, but they were there the law enforcement was there to stop anything in its tracks. And if Chicago, Chicago, I don't know if Chicago has the juice or the willpower to be able to. I'm not sure that part of the party would the Hamas part of the Democrat Party would cause the violence. They may want to stage protest. But like you said earlier with Kamala, they're just avoiding that whole thing. But her problem, another problem she has, is she's married to a Jewish gentleman. Kamala Harris's husband is a white Jewish guy. I mean, so
does that really matter, Joe? Seriously, does
I don't know.
I mean,
these people are so crazy. I don't know. We don't know what they'll do.
I don't think so. A spouse of a politician, I've never heard. I don't think that's going to be a factor. But who knows? These people are so crazy, you never know. But
That's
I will give the vice president a little bit of credit, because on Thursday last week she came out and she did condone parts of what the pro-Hamas wing of the Democratic Party was doing. Burning American flags, putting up Palestinian flags, and desecrating monuments and attacking police. She did, to her credit, again, we're fair on this show, folks. She did come down, against that. All right, let me ask you this, Joe. Okay, a couple comments here. One thing that is troubling to me is Trump's doing great in these polls. Unfortunately, it is not translating that Trump support into support for home state senators. I mean, I got a list of them right here, and this is troubling. Most of these politicians on the Democratic side are up 5 points. Now, Tammy Baldwin, Wisconsin, +5. Casey, Pennsylvania, +5. Rosen, Nevada, +5. Michigan, +5. Arizona, Gallegos against Kerry Lake. Gallegos is +3. Now, again, this is snapshot points, but boy, I mean, that is not a good sign. I mean, in Ohio, Bernie Moreno is behind Sherrod Brown, and yet Trump's winning the state by 8 or 9 points. So, Joe, what do you make of the fact that, Trump is doing so well, and yet some of our very, very well qualified Republican Senate candidates are still trailing?
Believe it or not, we see that even in Connecticut, not lately, but it always was. We'd have a Republican governor here for like 20 years, but they would always go, and they still are, with their Democrats in the federal government. So some of these states could be doing the same thing, where it's not that Trump doesn't have coattails, it's that people want to check and balance in some way in their mind. It hasn't translated. He's an anomaly. He's, like Jeb Bush said, he's a force to be reckoned to, and that he ran into. And so it's just Trump stands out totally different, But at the same time, Wisconsin's going to be tough to win. I don't know. At the end of the day, we pull that one out. Any kind of problems with voting and harvesting in that state's gone to the Republicans. But Pennsylvania is really the biggest. I really think he can take Virginia. And definitely North Carolina and Nevada. But Pennsylvania is really kind of like Gettysburg. It's where he was shot. It's like that's the state that will win and really guarantee, and he did that before in 16. There's enough voters. on both sides of the aisle, but can she get the African American vote out in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia the way Hillary couldn't? And again, really, we have to watch the black turnout. I think this week they said she has 70% in a poll that I saw of African American voters, and Biden had 90 or something like that. But she doesn't have it all wrapped up with the African American vote, and so that's going to continue to, especially the young men. They love Trump, and
They do.
so I think Pennsylvania goes. He wins. I can't say wins, but if the polling shows Pennsylvania 2 weeks before in Trump's favor, it's going to be very hard for some of the senators and whatnot to for that to translate. It's like going to a rock show and you don't want to show up for the opening bands. You want to get there, and if you're late, you're coming to see the band that's playing the Rolling Stones, and it's kind of like that. It's a strange thing, but that's what happens when you have such an illuminaris, a Trump person.
Well, the one thing I can I can tell you this, John, I'm going to go back to a theme we talked about early on in the show. If you believe these polling numbers, and I do, I think Donald Trump is up nationally by about 2 points right now. And again, he lost in 2020. I know some people don't think so, but the vote tallies show he was down 4 points. That's a 6-point swing. So let me give you this hypothetical, Joe, and we're going to close it out in a minute. Even if this race ended up being tied, say you go into election day. I know we have an election month, election week, except early voting. But if you go into election day and the polling is showing Donald Trump and Kamala Harris tied, say they're 48-48, Trump slips a point, she picks up a point. 48-48 translates into a Republican win of 300 electoral votes or more, folks. Don't let that scare you, because they run up the numbers in California and New York. Now, maybe not New York this time, but traditionally that's happened. So if it's 48-48, it's going to be a win. Joe, you got 20 seconds. Close it out for us.
Yeah, I've never felt more positive about the country coming back to the center. And that's what Trump has been doing. And the public has come there also based on numbers, finances, wars, and all the issues we know about. We need the policies. We need to concentrate on policies, not necessarily just on the candidates, even for Senate races. Look at the policies. Can you tolerate what's happening in this country? And what would we do if we give the left any more power? What's going to happen to America if they were in power for 4 more years?
Joe, thanks for being my guest today. Folks, we'll be back tomorrow. Enjoy your weekend. See you on Sunday. Same bat time, same bat channel.